Thank you, Sam. I'm really excited to tell you about how to get started with Grafana today. And I'm sure that you have some idea already of what Grafana is, at least enough to want to join this webinar, I guess. But maybe you're looking for, I don't know, a better way to understand your data. And you're looking around to figure out what options are available to you, right? Or maybe you have another team in your organization that is already using Grafana and you want to get in on the action, right? Regardless, you're in the right place. But in case someone actually tricked you into joining this webinar, Grafana is an open source visualization tool that lets you monitor things like web services, databases, and IoT devices. In fact, no matter where your data is, there's a high chance that you'll be able to connect and visualize it in Grafana, which we'll see today. And if you don't want to wait for me to stop talking, because that's going to be a while before you can start playing around with Grafana, you can already go now to play.grafana.org to explore Grafana a little bit. I'll post a link in the Zoom chat for you. So you can already now check it out. And in fact, Grafana Play is not the only place you can explore Grafana without actually having to install it and set it up yourself. Because a lot of companies, for example, GitLab and CERN and Wikimedia, even make their internal Grafana dashboards publicly available. Just Google public Grafana dashboards and you'll find more examples. And I cannot mention that Grafana is open source, and meaning that you can install it and get started using it already. You can find the source code on GitHub, and the installation instructions are available from our website in the documentation section. And while Grafana is free of charge, hosting any infrastructure requires both time and energy. So even though you're not paying for Grafana by itself, you might not have the time and energy in your team to manage all this yourself. So if you do want us to host Grafana for you, you can go to Grafana Cloud, and you can create a Grafana instance there. And in fact, if you want a completely hosted Grafana monitoring platform, we also host databases like Graphite, Prometheus, and Loki. But today, I'll do a demo that is running on my laptop. So, and if you want to follow along, you can actually follow along in one of the tutorials that we have on our newly launched learning platform. And so you can check it out. I'll actually post the link in the chat. So the tutorial that we're basically going to do is the Grafana fundamentals one. I'm gonna give you some extras during this webinar, but if you do want to tag along yourself, you can definitely do that. But enough of introductions. Let's get started with the demo already. So when you use Grafana, you typically have something you want to monitor, right? And in our case, we're going to use a little application that I built, and I want to be able to monitor it. It's called Grafana News. And it's this nifty little website where you can add links like this. Oops. And you can add them. So it pops up here on the top. And you can click this little triangle to vote for your favorite link, right? Simple enough, truly revolutionizing, I know. But we're going to look at how we can actually monitor this service. So the interesting part with this is that this service is actually using Prometheus, a very popular time series database, to expose metrics. And we can actually go and look at the metrics that this service is exposing by going to the endpoint/metrics. And what you'll see then is a bunch of these time series, as we call them. Every line here is a time series where you have something you want to measure and you have a value. And so what's interesting about Prometheus is that it will actually go to this endpoint and scrape this information and then store that in its own database. And you can configure Prometheus to come here and scrape every 30 seconds, every minute, or every second. It's up to you. And so you're basically sampling metrics from this application, which is, and then it stores all these time series in the database. And we actually want to look at these time series in a bit. I'm actually going to go to Grafana to see how we can actually connect Prometheus to visualize it. So I'm going to hop over to the next tab here, which is the login page for Grafana. And this is the first thing you'll see when you browse to Grafana. And if this is the first time you've logged into Grafana at all, then the default username is going to be admin, and the default password is going to be admin as well. If you click log in, you're going to be asked to set a new password. And because we're responsible, I'm going to do that. I'm not telling you what it is, but then I'm going to click submit. Oops. So let's try that again. OK, I'll try the first one again then. There we go. So when you log in, you're going to see this. This is what we call the home dashboard. And dashboards is a very central concept in Grafana. And essentially, it's this idea of a curated experience, a curated set of visualizations that tell a story of your application. And in a bit, we're going to create our own dashboard. But this home dashboard is a little different than the other ones because it tells you basically how to get started with Grafana. And for example, it links to the tutorial I mentioned before, how to add your first data source, and so on. But like I mentioned before, Grafana is a visualization tool. So it's not really a database. It doesn't actually contain your data. It doesn't contain the metrics that you've been collected. It doesn't contain the logs that you've been gathering, right? So in order for us to actually look at anything in Grafana, we need to connect the data to Grafana. And we do that by adding a data source. So if you look to the left of this dashboard here, you see a bunch of these tabs, right? And so for now, we'll go to configuration, and we'll go to data sources. And if you've already added other data sources from before, they'll be listed here. But since we haven't, I'm just going to go ahead and click Add Data Source. And this page now lists all the built-in data sources that we support. But if your favorite database is not listed here, don't fret. Don't worry, because we do have a bunch of community-built data sources as well. So you can easily go there and install another plugin for your data source. In our case, I mentioned that we're using Prometheus for this demo, which is one of the built-in ones. So I'm gonna click that. And as you can see, there is a bunch of things we can configure, right? Since I'm running this on my local laptop, I don't actually have to do much more than just tell it where it is. So I put in the URL to my Prometheus instance and which port it's exposed on. And then I scroll down and I hit Save and Test, right? So it looks like it's working. So what happens when I click Save and Test is that Grafana will actually make a request to your data source to make sure that everything is working as it should. Authentication is working. So if you see green now, that means that we can start looking at the data that's in Prometheus. And the best way to start looking at the data, because at this point, we don't really know what data we have. I showed you the application, but that actually collects a lot of different metrics. So the first thing you'd want to do is you want to explore what data is available. So the first thing we'll do is that we go to the side menu again, and we'll click this little compass here in the side menu. It's called Explore mode. And Explore mode is what we call what we call ad hoc queries, right? An ad hoc query is a request to a data source that is typically followed by another query, right? So you're trying to answer a question, and you're making a broad query first, and then with the knowledge you now have, you make a second query that's more specific. Let me show you how. So in this case, we've already selected Prometheus up in the Dropbox, but we can now either we write the query in this editor here. So Prometheus uses its own query language called PromQL, and I'm actually not gonna write it myself. I'm gonna click this drop down here, and I can see all the metrics that Prometheus has collected so far. In this case, I just happen to know that the metric I'm looking for is called TNS request duration. And if I click that one, I see something like this. So let me explain a little bit about what you're seeing. So at the top here, we have a graph. And the graph is showing that some line is going upwards, right? In fact, this line is what we call a counter. So a counter is a specific kind of metric, right? And it's a metric that only ever goes up. It only increases. So a counter is actually not that interesting in itself. So we're going to apply a function in a little bit. I'm just going to explain what we see at the bottom here. This is the actual data that the query is returning. So we can see all of this information down here. And then it's visualized in the graph up here, right? So the counter is not really that interesting as it is right now, because it's ever just going to go up. So an example of a counter is the number of requests that's been received by the service up to this point. But what we probably are more interested in is the rate of change of requests, or the number of requests. So we can use a PromQL function called rate here. And what that's going to do is that is going to calculate the rate of change over the last minute. So if we run that, we see something that looks a little more steady, right? We see this green line is now pretty much steady at 0.2 requests per second. And this is actually Prometheus. Like I mentioned before, Prometheus is actually going to your application and scraping that metrics endpoint. So we can see that Prometheus is doing that at a steady 0.2 requests per second. And we can see that we have a little bump here when I actually manually went in and refreshed that page. And we can see that we had some traffic here on other endpoints when I demoed that application that you saw earlier. So already now we can see that we have Prometheus, and we have some spotty traffic here, right? And what we can do is that we can actually zoom in on this part by clicking and dragging in the graph to zoom in on this area, right? And if we do want to, what we could also do is that we can look at the data for the last 15 minutes, for example. So now we know that we're always going to look at the most recent data. So new data is going to come in here. Let's actually try that out, see if I'm actually telling the truth here. So let's add another link here. I don't know. Let's add something there. We submit it. And oops, something broke. That's interesting. Let's see if we can reload. So actually, it looks like our website is, OK, that worked. That is actually excellent, because I can now show you what how to debug this application. So this demo application is actually built to fail every now and then, to be able to troubleshoot this, as we will see in a bit. But now we've added the link here. Let's just vote for it as well. And now if we go back to Grafana again, and we run the query again by clicking this little button up here, we see that we have some activity. Something is happening here in our service, which is great. Seems like it's working. Let's try adding a new link. This time, so let's add GitHub. This time, I'm going to leave out the URL and click Submit. So that actually broke the service. We see that we get an error message saying empty URL. That's unfortunate. That's not a great user experience. So if we go back to Grafana, we should have seen something in our graph. And so I happen to know that this actually, the empty URL leads to a bad request. So we actually see here that we got a 400. It's a HTTP status code that's 400, a bad request. But that really doesn't tell us that much, right? We know that something happened on the user side. So the user did something wrong, but we can't tell really what it was. We only see that it was a 400 response, right? So this is where metric is kind of limiting in that sense. This is about how much we can tell from metrics alone. But it does tell us that something was wrong. And now we want to look a little closer at what that problem was. And the typical way to do this is that now you dive into the logs. And in fact, Grafana support logs database sources as well. So we're going to look at how we can add a logs data source. So we do that in the same way as we did before. So go to Configuration, Add our data sources, and click Add Data Source up here. Now we can see that we've already configured a Prometheus data source. So let's add another one. So in this case, I'm going to scroll down to this section here called Logging and Document Databases. And one of my favorite logs data sources is called Loki. And in fact, the application that you just saw is using Loki. Or rather, Loki is scraping or looking at the logs file that the application is outputting to. So let's go ahead and click that. And just like Prometheus, we can add a URL to our data source here, which is Loki at port 3100. And let's leave the rest and just click Save and Test. Right? That looks like it's working again. And just like we did before, let's go to Explore and actually look at the logs. And right now, Prometheus is selected as the current data source. But we actually want to start looking at our logs. So let's switch our data source here. And not much changed. We still have this query editor up here. In fact, Loki is very similar to Prometheus in the query language it uses, which is very much intentional. A lot of the Prometheus queries you do can almost you can almost take them as is and query Loki, which is one of the many strengths of Loki. So I'm actually going to use this dropdown again, and I'm going to query logs with a label that is called file name and this file here. So that's cool. We see that we have a few log lines here. So up here in the graph, we see all the occurrences of log lines. So we can see that we have a few peaks here. And we can see that we have, on the bottom here, we actually have the log content. And Wow, it's really raining cats and dogs here. Not sure if you can hear that. But so at the bottom here, you have the raw log content. And you can see the color here represents the actual log level. And here we can see that we did actually have a problem here. We see that we got an empty URL. So if we click that, we get some more information. And here is really up to you what information you want to add. You can add more labels to make it easier to query your database. And let's see. So yeah, so you have the message, the error label, and a few labels up here as well. So that's cool. But let's actually see if we can find all the errors that we've seen so far. And I'm going to use an operator in Loki that looks like this. So it's a vertical bar followed by an equal sign. And what that is going to do is that it will listen to or it will take a string here, and we can actually search for all the errors in our logs. So it will do a substring match, and it finds all the errors that we've seen so far. And we can also see that we had, apart from the empty URL, we can also see a bunch of 500s that we saw before when I couldn't load the web page, right? So that's really cool that we caught that. And so that is both metrics and logs. So we saw that something happened. We saw the 400 in the metric side, and then we went over to logs to actually troubleshoot and see what was the actual error. And now I feel like we know a little bit more about the actual application and how it works. So the problem now is that I don't want to actually go into explore mode and have to write all these queries every day, right? Every time I want to see if a new error pops up, I don't want to go in here and run the query again, right? That makes no sense. So what I can do instead is that I can create a dashboard, which is a curated set of visualizations and queries that I found through explore mode. And I can create a dashboard by going to the side menu and click the plus here, create. And if I click dashboard here, I'm going to hop into this new view, right? And right now it's kind of empty, kind of boring, but Grafana knows that you probably will want to add a few panels to it. And what do I mean by a panel? Well, a dashboard is actually a set of these panels, which is like a combination of a query and a visualization. I'm going to show you what I mean. So if I actually click this button here, add new panel, I'm going to hop in to the panel edit mode. And we have three major parts to the panel edit mode. So at the top here, I see the visualization that I've chosen so far. And at the bottom here, I see the query editor. And that looks a little like what we saw before in explore mode. And we're actually going to write the query that we did before here. So in this case, I'll just add the request duration. I'm going to add the rate function to it. If I run that, we see sort of similar to what we saw earlier in explore mode, which is great. And I also want to introduce another function here. It's called sum. Because right now, you see in the legend here under the graph, you see all these time series. And right now, this query is returning every time series that matches this query. And at this point, I want to be able to see how much traffic that I receive on any given route. So what I can do is that I can sum so I can group a time series by a certain label. So if I write here routes, and then I run the query again, then you can see in the legend that we've now reduced the number of labels to these ones. And now we can see that the metrics endpoint is receiving the most traffic, although we have a few down here that's receiving some traffic, not a lot. But we can also do things like we can add we can improve on the legend in the graph by using one of these labels to make it a little bit prettier. So what you can do here is that you can use these double braces and one of the label names in here. So if I run the query again, then I'm going to see a little update here in the legend. So it looks a little nicer right now. And this is a template. So if I wanted to, I could add something like route : and that will complete the legend for me. But let's leave that out for now. OK, so we have the visualization on top here, and we have the query editor at the bottom. What you see to the right here is what we call the panel editor. And the panel editor is responsible for pretty much anything that has to do with visualization, whereas the query editor was more related to data. And what data do we want to visualize? Well, in the panel editor, you change aspects of the visualization. So for example, we can edit things like the title of the panel. So now you see that we updated the heading here at the top of the panel. But we can also change the visualization. So by default, you see the graph panel, which is by far the most common visualization in Grafana. And we see that we have a few other to pick from here. So for example, if I click stat here, then I see a whole different visualization, right? Now I see these tiles that shows me a number instead. And I can choose this to be the average, the latest value, the max, the min, you name it. And then we even get a little, some spark lines under the number here as well. I can click gauge, and I can see this as a, a gauge that goes from one value to another. So you can see how saturated, for example, a resource is. In this case, it doesn't really make that much sense to use it for our application. And so you can see that there's plenty of visualizations you can use. And there's even more if you go to grafana.com/plugins, where you can install more plugins and more visualizations to use with your data. So that is kind of cool. But let's go back to the graph panel again. And let's save this now. So I can click this button up here that says apply. And I'm going to hop back to, when I click that, I'm going to hop back to the dashboard. And what I actually can do, which is sort of nifty here, that I really like, is that let's say that you migrated a database at some point here. What I can do is that I can click this in this graph, and I can click this little drop down here called Add Annotation. And so Annotations is a cool feature with Grafana, in Grafana, that lets you add additional information to your graph. So in this case, I wanted to tell my team that I migrated the database at this point, right? Actually, before we do that, we need to save the dashboard. So to save the dashboard, you can click this disk up here at the top of the dashboard. So let's see now. Let's call it application. So I rename it. I hit save. And now I can click the graph, add annotation, and we can add this annotation now, migrated database. And if I click that, we can see this vertical line here that stays in the graph. So now we can hover over this little symbol here and we can see that we migrated the database at this point. And of course, you can use this however makes sense for your use case. You can, for example, you can add annotations for whenever you make a release, for example, whenever you deploy to production, and things like that. But so what I did now is that I added an annotation manually. And that's typically not very scalable. So what we can do instead is that we can go and actually add annotations from a data source, right? So we can ingest all the annotations from a specific data source. So let me show you what I mean. If we go to the dashboard settings, I can go here to Annotations, and there's this button here that says Add Annotation Query. And by the way, all of this is in the Grafana tutorial. So if you miss anything, just go back to the tutorial and make the steps yourself. So here, I'm gonna say that I want to actually, in this case, I want to bring in all the errors in my graph as annotations, so I can immediately see where the errors occurred. So in order to do that, I want to actually get all the errors from my Loki data source. So I'll click Loki there. And then I want to use the same query that I did before, right? I want to get all the errors. So I'm going to write my query that I wrote in the Explore mode, and I'm going to add it. And there it is. Now I can actually go back by clicking this back arrow. And now we can see that a few more lines have popped up here. And I can see that my errors are now appearing together with my metrics in the same graph, which is actually really cool now, realizing that we're actually correlating metrics and logs in the same visualization with two vastly different data sources. And let's actually, to really drive home the point here, let's add another panel. Right? So I click this Add Panel button up at the top. And if I click this button again here, so I'll add another panel here. In this case, I want to add a logs panel, a logs visualization, right? But we don't see anything here because the logs visualization requires a logs data source. So we need to change that. We need to go to the query editor down here, and we click the logs data source, Loki, that we set up from earlier. And we also need to put in a query. So now we suddenly see something here. So now we get all the logs in this panel instead of the Explore mode that we saw earlier. So if we click Apply now, we can see them both together in the same dashboard. And what I can do now is I can actually click the top of the panel and I can move it around, right? And I can resize them because I actually want to see a lot of logs at the same time. So I'm going to make it a bit bigger. But so what's really cool about this as well is that all the panels in one dashboard shares the time interval, or the time range. So if I go up here, I can change, like I did in Explore mode, I could change here to look at a different time range. But I can also click in the graph and change the time range from one of my panels. So now you see that even the logs panel to the right updated as well. And this makes it really powerful. So for example, you can see from one of the annotations in the graph panel that we had an error. Maybe we even had some downtime. And then I can immediately zoom in on that error and I can see the logs for it just in the same view, right? This is really powerful if you're trying to debug or if you're trying to figure out why something happened, right? So these are a few ways you can visualize data. And there's many more ways you can visualize data in Grafana. This has been a way to walk you through the major features of Grafana, but there's plenty more you can learn. We can do things like dynamic dashboards. which uses variables so you can change part of your queries dynamically by using dropdowns, for example, in your dashboard. So we can definitely improve this a lot more to make it more maintainable and more useful to us, right? But unfortunately, that's going to have to be in the next webinar. And I think that's all I wanted to show you for today. And I think we're going to Q&A now. So I'm going to look at, see if we can find any questions here. OK, so I got a question here that says, how can we get the Prometheus in our PC to follow your demo? So the demo I'm using right now is using Docker to start all the services needed. And in this case, I'm actually using this this command in this tutorial. So if I go here, so to run this demo, you need to clone this Docker environment here. And then you need to run this command. It's all in the instructions, and that will boot up Prometheus. It will boot up Loki and Grafana as well as the demo application. So hopefully that will be enough for you to get started. And let's see. So can we connect multiple Elasticsearch indexes in a single data source? Yes, you can. So what you saw now is that I can go to my data sources here, and let's actually save that one. So I can go back here, and there's nothing stopping me from adding more Prometheus data sources, for example. And I can call them differently. And they can use different authentication configuration, different endpoints. So you can add data sources with all different types of configurations. So you can see now that I've added 2 Prometheus data sources here. Let's see now. Log files may be spread across multiple files. How can we club a set of files and analyze the log info? Yes, so this is more a question of, this is more of a Loki question. So how you actually label data, how you label file names, for example, how you label the actual log lines, that's up to the actual data source itself. In this case, Loki. So Grafana only visualizes what Loki sends to us. And in this case, so for Loki specifically, you need to set up what part of the log line you want to index, for example. If you have more questions about Loki, you can go to the Loki project site as well. We also have a public Slack and a community forum as well. So actually, I'm going to post that in the chat, where so we do have a forum. So if you don't get your question answered here today, you can go to community.grafana.com and you can ask your question there as well. I hope that answered your question. So is there any plan to support more databases like DB2 in the future? So we're constantly adding new databases, and the community is adding databases as well. Even if you didn't see your favorite database here, you can go to, let me see if I can open that up for you. So you can go to grafana.com /plugins. And here you can see a bunch of plugins that's been developed by the community. So if you can't find your database among the built-in ones, check out the plugins. And if a lot of the companies we see, they have their own custom-built databases as well, and we do support plugins like you see here. So you can build your own plugin to support your custom database as well. So even if there's no support from the community or from the built-in data sources, you can still build the integration yourself if you really want to. So Grafana will be similar to Kibana of Elasticsearch. Actually, Grafana started out as a fork of Kibana. So Kibana came first, and the founder of, or the person who started working on Grafana actually wanted to use Kibana with Graphite. So originally, Grafana was just a fork of Kibana with Graphite support. But eventually, Grafana turned into something more than that and added more data sources. It turned into a whole different user interface. So that's kind of the relation between them. How are annotations stored? Does Grafana write them back to the upstream database, or are they stored by Grafana somehow? So in the beginning of the webinar, I told you that Grafana doesn't actually store anything itself. I'd like to modify that a little bit. So Grafana does have a SQL database that stores all your dashboards, and it even stores annotations. But that only applies to the annotations that you add manually. So like you saw in my second example with annotations, you can even bring in annotations from a separate data source. In that case, annotations would be stored in that particular data source. But again, if you have manual annotations, then you they are stored in the Grafana database. So beyond removing a point to manage an infrastructure, what is the benefit of using Grafana Cloud versus self-hosting Grafana? Well, that's a good question. So since we at Grafana Labs we basically, a big part of the Grafana team is working at Grafana Labs. We know a lot about Grafana, and we know how to operate it. Our own infrastructure is being monitored with Grafana, and we know how to operate it, and we can scale it for you, for example. So a lot of these issues that typically come with hosting your infrastructure, that's all managed for you. So you can just click create instance, and then you have a Grafana to log into. And yeah, I hope that answered. If you have more questions about that, yeah, again, go to the community site, and we can answer any other questions that you might have on the topic. Can we send data from MySQL to Grafana? So absolutely, you can. So we can go to this view here. So you see here that MySQL is actually one of the built-in data sources for Grafana. So if I click that one, I can name the path to my host, the database name, the authentication, and so on. And then you would actually go to, so we can actually go back to, let's add unfortunately, I don't have a MySQL database set up, but I think we can add one here. It's not going to be configured. But if we go back to our dashboard here, our application here, let's add another one. Let's add a panel here. And from this dropdown here, you can now select MySQL. And now you see that you get a whole different query editor than from before. So this is kind of nice, where every data source has a custom way of querying the data, right? So here you can basically build your SQL query. If you don't want to build it graphically, you can click this Edit SQL, and you can write the SQL as is. So yes, definitely you can use MySQL with Grafana. Is it possible to link multiple data sources? So, for example, Elasticsearch, Splunk, Zabbix, etc. So it depends on how you want to link them. And so, for example, if you want to query, let's say you want to query a specific service. So you have a name of the service, and you want to query multiple data sources. What you can use is a dashboard variable, which lets you. Let me actually show you how to do that. So here I can create in dashboard settings. I can create a variable here. So let's say that I want to create a variable called service, and I can choose to get my variable values for my variable from a data source. But let's do it. Let's see now. Let's use here. So I can do, for example, my auth API. I want to do my billing API, and if I go ahead and add that, I can go back to the dashboard here. See here. Oh, I think I forgot to save it. Yeah. So let's do that again. So service, we have auth, and we have billing. So if I go ahead and add that, save my dashboard. That's weird. Okay, so what you can do is that you get with dashboard variables, you can get a drop down at the top of your dashboard, and you can click that, and you can use that value in all of your panels. So, for example, you can have a visualization that uses Elasticsearch, and you can use that value from that variable to query data from that service. But you can also use it in a different panel to query data for that service, but from a different data source. I'm not sure if that answers your question on linking, but that is a way you can link data together and look at data from different data sources together. How do I send data from my service or production device to Loki or Prometheus or InfluxDB? So this depends on your data source. So you will have to look at the data source, that specific data source, to find out how you can set that up. For example, Prometheus you don't actually send data to Prometheus. Prometheus actually fetches the metrics from your service itself, whereas other metrics databases, you can send to the actual database. So it depends on what data source you're using. I can't give a general answer to that, unfortunately. You would have to look at the specific data source. So can you touch on alerting and how the collating of data sources can be used there? Yes. So Grafana does have support for alerting. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to cover it. But for example, if I click a data source here, you see that there's a tab here called alerts. And here I can create alerts from any data source, really. So that's going to be really useful if you can create alerts for really any data source. Of course, there are options like Alert Manager, which is a alerting solution for Prometheus, and you might want to use that instead. But the built-in alerting functionality you can use with any data source. Also, the tutorial is covering the alerting part as well. Hi, Marcus. How to choose the right time series database? Oh, that's an interesting question. So it depends on a wide variety of a lot of aspects. For example, I can share one team I was in earlier. We were using a platform as a service called Heroku, And our service was running on this platform as a service, but we actually didn't know how many instances were running because it was auto-scaling. And it only had a one URL to go to. So for example, if we were to use something like Prometheus, where Prometheus goes to that endpoint and scrapes that metrics endpoint, you would get different metrics because you would get different instances every time. So in that case, Prometheus wouldn't work very well. Instead, in that case, we opted for each instance sending metrics to another database, for example. So it kind of depends on your setup and how you want to get the metrics into the database. And of course, you can, if you want to, you can add all the metrics into a Postgres database as well. Of course, there's going to be additional benefits of using a specific time series database that will optimize a lot when it comes to storage and how to query the data. So I can't give a general answer to that. It just if you have a more specific scenario that you want to discuss, then create a question on the discourse forum in the community on community.grafana.com, and hopefully we'll be able to answer your question there. Can I create dashboards and publish to all users with automated mode via email attachment if required? I'm not sure what you mean by this. Publish to all users. I'm sorry, I don't understand what that question is referring to. Do you want to notify people when you create a dashboard? Is that it? So I don't think I'll be able to answer this. Please add your question with a little more details to the community forum. Let's move on here. Let's see. So is it easy to downsample roll-up data to retain data for longer periods of time? So again, this is not specific to Grafana, but it is more specific to the data source that you're using. So for example, if you're using Prometheus, then you want to look at configuring Prometheus to roll up data for you. So yeah, Grafana doesn't actually Grafana doesn't mandate how long you're storing something. Grafana simply sends a query to your data source and visualizes what it gets back. So you would have to look at the specific data source that you're looking to use in order to whether it's easy to do that depends on the data source, basically. How fast can we update the data on dashboards? Or is there a mode where new values are automatically loaded on the dashboards? Yes. So I actually, I did not show that. But so what you can do is that at the top of your dashboard here, you can actually set Grafana to update automatically every, say, 5 seconds. And let's see if it will actually update. Yeah. So every 5 seconds, the queries will run again and then populate the visualizations. So if you have, for example, a Grafana instance at your wall in your engineering department, you could set that to update, I don't know, every 30 seconds or every minute or something like that. And you could just leave it and it will update for you. You could also, something that is We're working on adding support. Basic support for example, streaming mode is available. It's not where we want it to be at this point, but you definitely, if you're interested in writing a plugin, you can add streaming support to that plugin. So that means that you can tell the panel to update in real time. So whenever there's new data, the panel will update. Unfortunately, the data source itself needs to support the streaming mode in order for that to be possible. Does Grafana work with timescale DB or Postgres with times? Yes. Timescale DB is really likes Grafana. If you go to Timescale DB's website, I know they have documentation on how to set up Timescale DB with Grafana. I don't have in my head exactly how you would do that, but it's that I know for sure it's they have documentation on how to do that. Can we use Grafana Cloud as an observability platform? Yes, you can. So as I mentioned in the beginning, not only can you host, you can use Grafana Cloud to host your Grafana instance. You can also host Prometheus, Graphite, Loki, and other databases. So you can actually store your metrics in Grafana Cloud as well. So that way you don't actually have to manage this yourself, but is managed by Grafana Cloud. So then you would only have to manage your own application, and you would send the metrics and logs and all that over to Grafana Cloud, and you would visualize it with a Grafana Cloud, a Grafana instance. So yes, definitely. Can Grafana run in a Raspberry Pi? Yes. This is a very common use case. In fact, if you go to the tutorials, the learning platform here, there is a tutorial on how to install Grafana on Raspberry Pi. So there's two ways, basically, you can install Grafana on Raspberry Pi. One being you can set it up in kiosk mode, where you have a monitor. And so you can have a little Raspberry Pi behind a TV on the wall of your engineering department that is kind of running itself. Or you can set up Grafana to run on a Raspberry Pi in your, for example, home network. So you can, from anywhere in your home network, you can log on to Grafana. So it's a great way of if you're doing home automation, stuff like that. So yes. So we do have a lot of questions, and unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to answer all of them. But please go to, again, Grafana, community.grafana.com and post your questions there, and we'll get to your question as soon as we can. Or someone from our community will be able to answer that question for you. So thank you all so much for joining. This has been great. Thank you for all the great questions. And yeah, if you have any more questions, go to community.grafana.com and we'll answer your question there. Thank you so much.